Hey friends, welcome to Rugged. Young adulting is tough, and I'm here to show you how to make it easy. You'll learn mindset strategies to harness your thoughts and emotions in ways that help you achieve your goals. I'm your host, Trey Tucker, so let's dive right in. Therapist Ritchie Pruehs is back again this week to finish out his story. It's an amazing story. If you haven't caught the first half of it, go back and watch part 1. Part 2 is going to help you so much with your own story, figuring out why you do certain things and helping you figure out your own emotions, maybe a new way to work them through and feel a little better. Here we go.
And a few weeks later, I revisited that part, that what I'd called my Fort Knox part. And I asked, because that's the cool thing about this internal work is you can actually talk to your parts and you can hear from them. And I asked that part, I said, what was it that let you relax? Because I know you were fighting tooth and nail. What was it? And the part said it was your love. Which I now know came, yes, through me, but was a gift that was mediated by my guide. You know, Jesus said, you better be good to these little ones because their angels do always, King James, that's how I memorized it. Their angels do always behold the face of their Father in heaven.
Oh, wow.
My guide was bringing that love straight from the heart of the Father God. Filling my heart with that love. And then through me pouring that heart onto this part. And it allowed this part to just relax and let go. That was round 1. There was another major round to come, and I'm sure there will probably be more, because one of the things I've really learned is that healing and growth and change is round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4. It's not a one and done.
No.
I wish it were.
I was going to say, every bit of progress I make, am I there yet? And then a year or two later, I'm like, oh, no, there's still more.
Yeah, so probably the critical, I mean, that was very critical. But then a few weeks later, I'm doing some internal parts work, and a dear friend of mine, she's dear friend, she's not a therapist, but she is gifted with spiritual insight, and she's gifted with, like, she can see what's going on in her own parts. We've done a lot of parts work in her life, and she's amazing at turning inside, and, you know, she'll see these little girl parts and she'll talk to them, and I mean, she's just truly amazing. Her name is Claudia, and not only can she see the parts in her own head, but she was gifted, I believe, by the Holy Spirit with an ability to see what was going on in my head as well. Especially since even though I'd had a breakthrough, doesn't mean the war is over. And yes, that breakthrough was real, but it's not like suddenly I could perfectly see all my parts and hear from them perfectly. And so she was able to recognize almost like a presence. I mean, it was, if you were to speak metaphorically, it was as if my mother was still in my head, or at least a part of her was still in my head. And there was still a battle between trying to conform to all that she represented. And there were parts of me led by that belonging part, but there were other parts as well that had kind of lined up behind that and that were pushing me to conform, you know, to conform to the faith of my child, to conform to, you know, sometimes to what my wife wanted me to do. And then, you know, so there was this battle. So it was, speaking metaphorically, it was as if my mother was still in my head. And so I realized that it was time to have what I call a come to Jesus conversation with my mother. And you could call this a Gestalt technique. I don't know if you've heard of that, but...
Yep. But go ahead and explain it.
Well, we call it the empty chair. And we'll, as a therapist, we'll put a pillow on the empty chair. I did this recently with one of my clients who was coming out of a difficult divorce, and there were some things that she needed to say to her ex that would not be productive to say in his presence, but that she needed to say. And so I put a pillow in the chair and I invited her to say those things. And then when she was done, I invited her to go to that pillow, remove it, sit in that chair, be her husband, and say back to herself the things that she needed to hear from him. And so in this moment, I did that. I had, as it were, a conversation with my mother, and it was one of the most powerful experiences of my life. I mean, my sense of it was that it was something that should have happened years and years ago. And yet, on some other level, I think it was all in God's plan.
Right.
But it was an amazing experience. I remember it was as if I was looking my mother in the eye and saying, Mom, you're done. You did your utmost. You did your best to love me. You did your best to get me into heaven. But it's time to let go. See, when we're driven by fear, and my mother was definitely driven by fear, we lunge for control. I remember first time I drove up to visit my wife's family when we were first starting to date, and I met her younger brothers, and one of them was really into motorcycles, and he wanted to take me on a ride. So I get in the back of that thing, and by the end of that ride, I had my entire funeral planned. I mean, I was terrified. Why? Because I was not in control.
Yeah.
So when we're driven by fear, we lunge for control. And that's what my mother had been doing. And that's why she, made sure worship happened and all these other things. And so I said, Mom, it's time for you to let go. It's time for you. And by the way, you've done a great job. I'm in a great place. I have an experience with God that is just unbelievable. I can't tell you how much I love God. Can't tell you how much I love Jesus. I'm heavily involved in my church. You'd be proud as peaches of me. And by the way, my kids are also involved. And oh, Mom, I have to mention that in a very deep way, you love my kids, especially my daughter, almost better than you love me. In fact, definitely better than you love me. It was healthier love. You did an amazing job. And I truly believe that an awful lot of the goodness that I am crazy proud of in my daughter today, her heavy involvement in church, which flows, it seems, from her heart, a good chunk of that is because of how you loved her, Mom.
Wow.
And my friend Claudia is looking at this, and she says, in what she could see, it looked like my mother and I were both like 5 years of age. I mean, is this real, or is it all? Of course it's all in my head, but on some level it's real because of its effect on my life.
Yeah, it's shifting you.
Oh yeah, it's totally shifting me.
Yeah.
She said, Rich, when you started that conversation with your mom, it's like you and your mom were both 5 years of age. You both needed to grow up. But she said by the end of that conversation, you were both adults. And I was able to say to my mom, it's time to let go. It's time for you to leave and just step into the arms of Jesus. And Claudia told me, she said she could see that that's what happened, And that gave me a release that was unparalleled, And again, I'm sure there will be more rounds of some of this, but that was right at the core issue of my emotional life, my spiritual life, my marriage, my ministry. I mean, it had its tentacles into all these arenas. And I feel like now I'm able to step into freedom because here's the thing. See, I mentioned earlier that I used to look at myself as having this double life.
Right.
There was the good little boy that wanted to please mommy, and of course that was the good part. that wanted to do the right thing.
Yep.
And then there was this bad part that would push me to do naughty things, like the soda pop.
God forbid.
And there were some other things.
Yeah. Always are.
That we'd probably all agree were sinful. And so my perception was that was the negative bad part, kind of like that was the devil on my shoulder, and this other part that wanted me to conform was like the angel part, the good part. I now realize that both of those parts were driven by fear. Both of those parts were very selfish. And I figured that out because, I'm now a psychotherapist, so I'm not preaching regularly, but every now and then my pastor will invite me to preach. And whenever that happens, this belonging part jumps in immediately, and it's like, okay, Rich, you got to be a good boy. You've got to be a good boy. And of course, my immediate thought is, well, that's the good part,
Mm-hmm.
and all my bad parts that push me toward, sinful behavior, those are the bad parts. And then it hit me because I asked myself, why does that part want me to be such a good boy? So that God will bless me. Because that part believes that God only blesses good boys.
Yeah.
Well, why does it want God to bless me? Because then I'll preach a good sermon. Why does it want me to preach a good sermon? Because then I'll get the kudos from the congregation who will come up to me. Oh, Rich, that was so amazing. Oh, that was such. In other words, that so-called good part is just as selfish and sinful as the other parts, and it's trying to fill the same hole in my soul just through a different way.
Yeah.
Through the kudos of the church members instead of the pleasant feeling of, I have a sweet tooth part, of sweets or whatever else.
Right. I remember you saying on a similar note that sometimes there's a part when you speak that's like, you better do well in this speech because then your high school friends will like you even more.
Oh, yeah.
Even at your current age, it was still about the high school friends.
Yes, that's very true, because it's as if key church members, because I don't think any of my high school friends are part of the church where I'm preaching, but there's certain church members there that I perceive to be the sort of people that I would want to like me from my high school class. The sort of high school friends that were the popular kids, the smart kids, the professional kids, the successful kids.
Yeah.
And I mean, oh yeah, you're so right, Trey. I used to, for years, I dreamed of being invited to preach at my high school class reunion because it was Christian school. So there's a Sabbath service and of everybody being so impressed, crazy. And what's so beautiful though, what I so love about the experience I'm now coming into is instead of patting the so-called good part in the back and shoving those bad parts that would lead me toward, negative behavior away, I can come from true self, which has a completely different place. I believe true self is much more in harmony with how Jesus approaches us. Mm. And Jesus doesn't approach us with this judgmental, oh, you're bad, you're good. Oh, let me pat you on the back, but wow, you're out of line and we need to punish you. I can approach both of them with the recognition that they're both just trying to fill the hole in my soul. Mm. Of course, it never works, but their effort is for a good cause. Yeah. And so I can approach both of those parts with love and compassion and caring, which is, by the way, what they actually need. And I can turn to what we call the exiles. The exiles are the parts that carry burdens from our past, from our childhood. And of course, there's in me there's a part. And one of my guides told me that this is like the exile to which all your exiles meet and end. It's like they're all somehow connected to this one. And it's a part that was filled with insecurity and fear and shame, and a lack of confidence and a sense of unworthiness. And from true self, I can come to that empty part that's so desperate for a sense of adequacy and a sense of belonging, because the antidote to shame is belonging. The antidote to insecurity is confidence. The antidote to fear is love, because love casts out fear. And when I approach that empty part from true self, which I believe is God within me, I mean, call it the Holy Spirit, call it Jesus, Christ in you, the hope of glory. There's lots of language. Peter refers to it as the divine nature. We become partakers of the divine nature that dwells within us. When I can approach that empty exile part from true self, I can pour love, which of course ultimately is from Jesus. I can pour love into that part that melts away the fear. I can pour confidence into that part that melts away the insecurity. I can pour belonging, a deep sense of connectedness into that part, which melts away the shame. And then the protectors that used to push for me either being a really good boy so I'd get kudos, or that would push me towards something else that, at least in the moment, seemed like it filled the hole in the soul, then those parts don't have to do that anymore. They can be set free. And now that part that I used to call Fort Knox, it's still my favorite part. I know we're not supposed to have favorites, but it is. It just is. And it's the creative juices in me.
Yeah.
That's its task now, that it's chosen to take on, is to be that, which kind of fits. It's outside the box, because creativity is always outside the box.
Right.
Part of me that's always thinking up something new, and I treasure that part to this day.
Man, the word that I don't think you've said, but you've said it without saying it, is peace. It seems like that's one of the cumulative effects of this journey for you. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. Now, I want to be clear, though. Yes, I have, especially since this breakthrough 3 months ago, I've experienced peace that's deeper and richer than ever before. And I'd love to tell you I've been living in blissful peace ever since.
Right.
But that would be a complete lie. Like I mentioned earlier, there's rounds of healing. And every now and then I'll wake up in the morning with parts that are extremely anxious about something, and they're all bent out of shape and worried and whatnot. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes I'm able to have a conversation with them. And not too many mornings ago that happened, and they were really anxious, and I was able to sit down and listen to them and ask if they could just relax. And they did. And again, I'd love to tell you that that's what always happens.
Right.
It's not. Sometimes they just stay wound up.
Yeah.
But, it's a journey. It's a journey. What I am excited about, and this brings me such deep joy and a deep sense of gratitude, is I see progress. There was a mentor that came into my life back in the mid-'90s. She was an alcoholic, and I probably learned more wisdom from her than anybody in my life. And her favorite phrase was progress, not perfection.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look back over my life, I see progress throughout much of my life. And especially the last 3 months, I see a ton of progress. I mean, it's like the progress has really been on the uptick. Yeah. But not perfection. Yeah. Not even close to perfection. And that, yeah. In fact, you mentioned peace. One of the things I'm learning to have is peace, even when the parts are all bent out of shape and out of whack.
Okay.
That's harder.
How do you do that?
Well, I start by asking them to step back, but sometimes they don't. And then I try to remind myself that there's a deeper reality. See, let me put it this way. Trey, if you could see right now, if you could literally be given a vision, like from Jesus, of how Jesus sees you, you would be amazed. You would also be delighted. And I mean, out of the box, out of this world delighted. You would be like, really? You know, because Jesus sees us radically differently than we see ourselves. Just a few weeks back, during this, after this breakthrough, I was working with it seems like all my parts are really stubborn, hard-headed. And this was I call it my skeptical part. And it was not wanting to let go. And for an instant, I caught a glimpse, I think, of how Jesus sees that part.
Huh.
And it was like, oh, it's so beautiful. I mean, I saw the good of that part. And I think that was a glimpse of how Jesus sees us. Back in the 90s, I read this book by one of my heroes in life, Brennan Manning, a wonderful spiritual leader. And he told about this new name that God had given him that represented how God looks at him. And I thought, well, that's cool. And I remembered that Revelation describes getting a white stone with a new name that no one knows except the person that receives it.
Right.
So I figured, so I'm going to get this white stone someday, and I'm going to look and say, well, of course. So let's ask, because I don't know what my new name is. And I asked, and about 3 weeks later, I don't know why it was 3 weeks, probably because I'm so hard-headed. I don't know. I sensed the whisper of the Spirit saying, faithful, which made no sense to me whatsoever, because I did not view myself as faithful. Now, if I were somebody like Andy Stanley, I'd like, yeah, faithful, you bet. I mean, that's my view of him. I'm sure he has his flaws. He's human like the rest of us. But by and large, kind of like Daniel in the Bible, I think he's a pretty good guy. And so, that might have fit. It just didn't seem to fit me at all. And I'd met my mentor, and she had introduced me to the 12-step process and the fact that transformation seems to come through a deep experience of brokenness, which, by the way, is really, really true. And I thought that the name God would give me would be something that would encapsulate that idea of transformation through brokenness. And instead, it's just faithful. And it's like, well, that's dumb. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. And for years, it made no sense. Between 95, 96, when that came to me, and 2017, when I was on my walk, and I always pray on my walk, and I was thinking about that name and thinking about how much it doesn't make sense. And then it did. Because I realized that name represents how God looks at me, which is so radically different than how I look at myself. And ever since 2017, I've been trying to grasp that mystery, and I can't quite grasp it. I suspect, what was Obama's phrase? It's above my pay grade.
Yep.
Because I look at me, and I can give chapter and verse on sins I've committed. I'm not going to make that stuff up. So from my perspective, that's like true about me. That's real. So my perspective of myself as being a messed up sinner is real.
Yeah.
So what I say about me being a sinner is real. God comes along and says, no, you're righteous, faithful, holy, perfect. 2 Corinthians 5, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. Old things have passed away. All, not just most, not even just some, all things have become new. So I often struggle with the question. I say I'm messed up. Jesus says I'm faithful, perfect, holy, and righteous. Whose truth is more true?
Wow. That hits. Wow. Man, so looking back at your story, one practical application that I'm thinking of is that you treated your parts the same way that you eventually treated your mom, in that you looked and you realized these parts that once seemed totally in the way and totally blocking everything good you wanted, you then saw, okay, well, actually they had a different intention, and you moved closer to them, and you created an actual relationship where you could give grace. And the same thing with your mom, where for a while you looked back and you realized, well, she was just running things out of fear. And now you realize, well, she was trying her best, and she had a good heart, and so her motives were there for you. And so you were then able to move toward her in a way that brought relationship instead of estrangement. And I'm sure you see some of the therapy culture these days. It's creating a lot of, well, I'm cutting my mom off, or I'm cutting my friend off. And it's like, I've got to protect my peace.
Yeah.
And that probably works for a while, but it's surface level. But you went in and you did the work to bring integration rather than cut off parts and cut off your mom and bring resentment and just trying to keep peace on an external environmental level. You actually went to the root of this stuff and found the answer there.
Yes, I would agree. And I would add that the reality of God is so much deeper than I ever imagined. I used to have a pretty simplistic, dualistic, either or, right, wrong, light, dark perspective. Mm-hmm. It's just so much deeper than that. I mean, see, what I believe Jesus says about me, and what I'm slowly starting to consider might be true, is also true of my mother, which means my mother was a perfect mother.
Mm. Whoa.
So, and I don't know if this is an explanation that really grasps the fullness of that, but I think it might be part of it, because I think she was part of God's perfect plan for my life. Because I have a lot of clients that struggle with enmeshment.
Yep.
And I understand that from the inside out.
Yeah, you're able to help the people you used to be.
Yeah. I mean, if I could go back and pick a different mother, would I do it? No, not at all. Not at all. I'm so grateful for the mother that I had and for all the dysfunction thereof.
Yeah.
And yet, you mentioned peace. There's a peace in recognizing that we're all a little crazy.
Yes, sir.
It's just that some of us are brave enough to admit it.
Yeah.
And kind of own it and just let go. Who said we're supposed to be perfect anyway?
Exactly.
And I'm just, if I can see at least some progress, that's all I need.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I wouldn't trade any of it.
Yeah. Man, so powerful. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we talk about?
Just thinking about people that are listening, especially dads.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to share something that I wish my dad would have done. I wish he would have stepped up and pulled me away from my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I wish he would have let out in having some of those difficult conversations that parents have. It was always my mother that had those conversations because she was always the mouthpiece for my parents as a group. I wish my dad would have done a lot of that. I think that could have been really healthy for me, if he had done that. So, if there's a dad listening to this, your presence in your kids' lives, especially in the life of a son, if you have a son, especially when he reaches early adolescence and a multitude of issues come up, sexuality comes up, hormones start kicking in. And if you don't step up, you're leaving that son to feel like he has to battle this stuff alone.
Yeah, like an orphan.
Yeah. And one of the best things you can do is just sit down and say, hey, son, it's time for us to have some really serious conversations. And these are going to be different than the conversations we've had in the past where I'm the parent and you're the kid. Mm-hmm. And I'm here to kind of straighten you out and tell you what to do. These are going to feel very different. And they should feel different because you're becoming a man. And that's what you're en route to. And so I'm starting to have communication with you, conversations with you from that perspective. Mm. So when we have these conversations, I want you to know, son, that you can tell me anything, including sins that you may have committed, and I will not be the dad. I will be the friend. I'm just here to listen, and I'm here to let you know that you're not alone in those battles. So I'm not here to criticize you. I'm not here to punish you. I'm not here to get on you. I'm not here to wag my finger at you for making a mistake or committing a sin. I'm here to be with you in those battles. That is one of the most beautiful things that a dad can do. So, yeah.
Man, sounds like a separate conversation we need to have for a new episode. So, amazing stuff. I appreciate you, brother.
You bet.
Hey, thanks so much for being here today. Before you go, would you hit that subscribe button so that future episodes come right to you? Thanks so much, and I'll see you next time.